Hello and welcome back to Top 5 Scary, my friends. I'm Taylor, your casual crypt keeper, and I got something for you today. Now, a new Insidious movie just came out. We're all excited to see it. Insidious: The Red Door. Does that have anything to do with the Bible? No. Not really. But a new one just came out and we're hoping people are searching for Insidious on YouTube. So with that in mind, this is the top 5 biblical stories scarier than Insidious. You can let me know down below if you have a favorite scary biblical story. I don't really know the Bible that well, to be honest. My grandfather was a preacher, but he got excommunicated, so he doesn't really do that anymore. Let's get right into it. Number 5, the Plagues of Egypt. So coming up first is going to be the Plagues of Egypt, a classic, horrifying biblical story for Bible fans of all ages. While the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt, the good Lord was trying to show the ruling pharaoh at the time that he'd better let all of the chosen people go or there'd be some serious trouble. Now the pharaoh didn't heed the warning and was divinely punished 10 times, one for each of the pharaoh's false gods. Now maybe you've heard through cultural osmosis that there was a rain of frogs and locusts, but unless you've spent some time in between the pages of the Bible, do you know all the other horrific plagues? Because there was 10 of them. A lot of horror going on. Let's go through them in order. First up, we had the Nile River running red with gore, resulting in dead fish and undrinkable water. Plague number 2, the frogs. You know what a frog is. I don't need to explain that. They're like these little green guys. Then came the lice, next plague. Then the flies, kind of similar to the lice really. And then the big livestock plague. This one was kind of fun. It killed off large swaths of farm animals, chickens, cows, others, dead. Then we had everybody's favorite plague, the boils. Painful, disgusting red sores and boils manifesting on the Egyptian skin. Scrumptious. Now the boils were cooled by the next plague, which was a scourge of hail that destroyed the crops and lands that gave life. And then the locusts came. Everybody loved the locusts. They're like little bugs that eat everything. Next plague was a thick, never-ending cloud of darkness, which was probably fantastic for vampires and real dour for anybody else. Now, if you've been keeping track at home, that's 9 plagues, meaning we got one last plague, and that's the death of all firstborns, which afflicted every family in Egypt. Finally, a win for the middle children of the world. The good Lord asked all the Israelites to paint a bit of goat fluid on the door to make sure the angel of death knew they were chill and not to pox any firstborn children. The plagues of Egypt is kind of a story that showcases that when you make God angry, he takes that really, really personal. I think that's literally what they mean when people are talking about divine retribution. It's stuff like this. It's plagues of locusts and frogs. And if you're looking for way more scary videos that might be about Insidious, might be about the Bible, we've got all of that and then some on the channel. Seriously, if you can think it up, we got 2 or 3 videos on it. So click on through, hit subscribe, please ring that little bell as well so you don't miss a single one of our videos as soon as they go up. But do that at the end of this video, because I got 4 more stories loosely related to Insidious coming up for you right now. Number 4, the Witch of Endor. Now coming up next is the story of the Witch of Endor. It's not the Witch King of Angmar, the Lord of the Nazgul, and this isn't involving the forest moon of Endor where the shield generator for the second Death Star was built. It also doesn't have a lot to do with Insidious. We've crossed all 3 of those words off. I'll tell you what the Witch of Endor was. Now the first king of Israel, Saul, who was a notable good man, was facing a severe crisis. He had disobeyed God and was facing an impending war from the Philistines. So in desperation, Saul sought out guidance from God, but was left on divine red by the big man upstairs and was being ignored. His pleas were unanswered. Saul did what any of us would do in a similar situation when you can't get a line to God. In trouble? Better call the Witch of Endor. Oh, did you think I was going to do like a better call? Never mind. Saul rang up the Witch of Endor, a necromancer of some renown who was able to help Saul conjure the spirit of the dead prophet Samuel, hoping to gain a little insight for the upcoming war against the Philistines. Samuel's spirit appeared and spoke to Saul. Samuel's message was a very grim one, letting Saul know that he was not going to do terribly well in this war and was going to lose the war and also die. The prophet reiterated that Saul's disobedience and rejection of God had led to this outcome, you know? Mind your manners, mind your P's and Q's, maybe you won't die in a war. Overwhelmed by the encounter, Saul fell to the ground in despair. The witch then provided him with a meal before he departed. Now the story of the Witch of Endor serves as a cautionary tale against seeking supernatural guidance outside of God. I think that's a pretty easy moral to follow. Don't contact a necromancer. Be careful with your spiritual mediums. Josh Lambert in the first Insidious film got lucky when he contacted a trustworthy medium, and I don't remember the name of that character, but you might not be. So Josh Lambert, King Saul, pretty similar. Number 3, the Book of Enoch. Coming up next today is going to be the stories out of the Book of Enoch, an ancient religious text that is attributed to the biblical figure Enoch. Duh. It's the Book of Enoch. I would assume that he wrote the book. Enoch is said to have been allowed to take a little tour of heaven and shown divine visions of the afterlife and the kingdom of God. Now there's a lot of discrepancy from Christian scholars if this book is considered a canonical text, but it is considered very significant and is unsettling. It does have some interesting mythological aspects to dig into. The most well-known portion of this book that people discuss, people talk about, is referred to as the Book of Watchers. This section describes the descent of angels known as the Watchers. Doesn't that sound ominous? Now these angels became obsessed with human women and their beauty, and I mean, come on, can you blame them? Have you seen human women? Va va voom! Anyway, these angels settled with human women and they birthed a new race of beings called the Nephilim. Now the Nephilim are described as being these gigantic, monstrous, hybrid human beings. Kind of like, this is a nerdy reference, but if you've ever seen Attack on Titan, those big things, they're kind of like that. Listen to this quote about how they were corrupting humanity. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 meters, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds, and beasts, and reptiles, and fish, and to devour one another's flesh, and drink the blood. Enoch was chosen by God to deliver a message of judgment and warning to these fallen angels and their scary giant offspring. He was shown a glimpse of Judgment Day and the establishment of a righteous kingdom on earth, a bright vision of a future where the Insidious franchise is talked about with the same reverence as the Godfather trilogy. Theaters are filling up, people are pre-ordering tickets, they're getting IMAX releases, Blu-rays with special features, there's an extended Insidious universe, it's bigger than The Conjuring, it's crossing over with The Conjuring. Not all of that was in the Book of Enoch, but some of it was. Number 2 is going to be the story of Job. This next story is my personal favorite story from the Bible. I've always found it kind of fascinating, even as an outsider. It's the tragic story of Job. Job is a righteous, God-loving man who lives in the land of Uz. Not like goo, U-Z. Satan, Lucifer, the devil, Beelzebub, Pete Davidson, whatever you want to call him, the devil appears before the Lord one day and proposes a friendly challenge. The devil challenges God and says that Job only reveres the Lord because of the blessing and protection that he enjoys, and that if Job had a terrible life, he wouldn't worship God. Well, God kind of does one of these and thinks, oh, maybe. So God grants Satan permission to test Job's faith. Seems like a horrible thing to do to one of your subjects, but hey. So Satan rubs his little paws together and gets right to work tormenting Job. Job loses his wealth, Job loses his family, and Job loses his health. However, Job loves the good Lord and his faith does not compromise. So Job's good buddies, his close friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, you know how everybody's got a friend named Zophar, come to comfort Job. But they tell Job that all these things are happening to him because he deserves it. Suffering is a punishment for wrongdoing. Job is like, hey, I didn't do anything wrong. He maintains his innocence and questions why, as a righteous man, he must endure such immense pain. So he presents this case directly to God. He rings him up and to try and understand these reasonings behind his suffering. Why are you doing all this to me? Job remains steadfast that he's innocent and doesn't deserve any of this. So God responds to Job out of a whirlwind. God speaks to Job, emphasizing his divine power, wisdom, and sovereignty over all this creation. God asks Job a series of rhetorical questions to illustrate how little we as humans really know. And Job realizes this and humbles himself before God, puts himself back in his place. In the end, God kind of undoes a lot of that torment. He gives Job his fortune, his family, and he blesses him with more than he had before. Job's faith is vindicated, and he comes to understand that God's ways are just above and beyond his little Joby human comprehension, and he'll never understand what the big guy's doing up there, but he should just sit back and have it happen. It is presented as a very uplifting, optimistic story about having a never faltering faith, but there's something about a story where the divine creator lets an innocent soul suffer immensely just to prove a point that seems kind of terrifying. It makes humans seem like ants, It's very similar to how the family in the Insidious franchise keeps being tormented, but hey, their faith never falters, and they're always keeping their chins up because the Insidious movies are viable, so they're gonna keep making sequels, and you should see the Insidious, The Red Door, that's coming out in theaters already after this video. They didn't pay us for this. Number 1, the Book of Revelations. The Book of Revelations, also known as the Apocalypse of John, is the final book of the New Testament in the Bible. So there will be some spoilers if you haven't gotten around to reading it yet, so skip ahead to the end of the video if you don't want to ruin it. It's a highly symbolic and apocalyptic text that presents a series of spooky visions and prophecies about the end times and the ultimate victory of God over evil. So our book begins with John identifying himself and stating that he received these visions while in exile on the islands of Patmos. He then addresses 7 letters to churches all over the world, offering praise and admonition and encouragement. But the big chunk of the book, the meat of it, what we're all talking about, is these dramatic visions that John sees, these crazy, literally out of this world, these cosmic battles between angels and demons, these heavenly scenes, these things that look like they could be sweet metal album art or like backgrounds from a Doom game. All these crazy battles with the horsemen of the apocalypse, dragons, the Lamb of God. Oh, big stuff, big, really cool stuff that would look awesome painted on the side of a van. The book describes a great tribulation that will come upon the earth, the apocalypse, marked by natural disasters, plagues, persecution of believers, the rise of a beast, commonly interpreted as a symbol of a tyrannical ruler or empire, and a false prophet who deceives people with miracles and leads them astray. Sounds kind of fun. John sees the ultimate victory of God, though, through all of this. He witnesses the final judgment where the wicked are condemned and the righteous are rewarded, and a new earth is described where God dwells with his people and all suffering and all sorrow are eliminated in this new heaven. And in this new heaven, there's as many Insidious movies as you want there to be. There's endless stories for the Lambert family and that demon that's got like red lipstick on his face and he kind of looks like Darth Maul. And what else happens in the Insidious franchise? I've only seen the first one, but you better see Insidious 5, The Red Door, because it just came out and the Bible was scarier than it. That's about all she wrote for this one, my ghouls and goblins. Keep on creeping on, go see Insidious, The Red Door, and take it easy.